Today I'm hanging out with my Model Y in my garage. It's raining outside, we're supposed to stay inside, and I have my favorite sweats on and don't really want to take them off, to be honest. So let's get into the video where I'm just going to demonstrate all the measurements of the car. To me, this would be kind of a boring video, and the average person it might be, but tons of people have been asking about a bunch of specific measurements on the car. So I'm going to try to hit all of them today in this video. I'm sure I'm going to miss something, so leave a comment below and I'll make a future video with everything I missed. But for now, let's get into the measurements. And just to reiterate, don't feel bad skipping this video at all. I would skip it for sure. It's going to be boring unless you're into these measurements, and hopefully for some people this is going to answer a lot of questions. So here are going to be the measurements most people want to hear, and I'll do everything right now in the hatchback trunk. Now the width of this panel right here that covers up the under storage compartment, not including these side panels, is right at about 37.5 inches. And here is the width on the smallest part of the trunk, because this comes out a little bit where the wheels are on both sides. So it's 37 inches across at your smallest width in the trunk. Now I'm measuring from side cubby end to side cubby end over here, and it's about 50 inches across. So if you have a really long object that you're wondering if you can shimmy in there, you got about 50 or less inches to deal with there, as long as it's not too big, because the side cubbies are only so big. So right here is the base of the side cubby up to the floor, and that's about 11 inches. And then if you look up to the highest point that you're going to be able to get, you're right at about 23.5 inches. Now from the inside, I'll actually measure these seats across. So up here at the top, 16 inches. And this one should be about 10.5 from what I've heard. Actually up here, to me, that looks more like 11. That looks like 11.25 inches right there. And then the right seat right here, depending on where you're looking, is about 17.5 inches. So measuring the actual opening itself, right about 39.5 inches down here from the seal to the seal, the lowest point. And then if we go a little bit further up and measure the seal. Now up here it actually oddly opens up a little bit to about 43 inches. So then here, going from seal to seal, probably about 39 inches. Now over here, where it starts coming in a little bit, similar, but about 38.75 of an inch. Now if we look here to right about here, which is going to be your kind of low point where it starts curving, about 19.5 inches. And then from right here, we should measure to this part, not the seal, because this is going to be the tallest object you can get in. So if we measure from the floor up to there, about 27.25 inches is going to be the tallest your object can be to actually slide into this trunk. Now here's the first under storage compartment. So if we measure from the under storage compartment up to the actual seal, at the lowest point right here, it looks to be about 35.5 inches. And then if we go further back and look at the tallest point, we can see probably about 40 inches. Now as you can see, this under storage compartment has a few different shapes right here. I guess they designed that for different objects, I'm not entirely sure. But here at the bottom across, it's about 24 inches, maybe about 23.5. Then if we measure across, kind of including these little bumper things, it's about 29.5 inches. Now over here, about 27 inches. And then above those bumpers, your maximum width right here is going to be about 31 inches. In the middle, similar. Then it's going to get a little smaller right here to about 29 inches. And then depth up to the actual floor of the car is about 18.5 inches. So that's from here up to here. And then the depth of the compartment itself is about 14 inches. But things can definitely go above this, because while this compartment ends right here, the actual lid doesn't sit until here. So the space there that you still have to work with is about 2.5 inches. Now if we measure the length going towards the front of the car, of the bottom of it, you're looking at about 14 inches, and then it's going to get bigger as it slopes up to about 18 inches at the top. So this second compartment really isn't much. I mean, I'm just putting my hand here, and then it slopes up here. But it will help you with small things like the Tesla charging cables and any like cleaning products and such that are definitely sealed, but you just want to keep in there at all times. I think this would be a great place to put that stuff. So at its smallest point across right here, you're looking at about 29.5 inches. And then length right here, about 18.75 of an inch. And then it does slope up right here, and that slope is about 2 inches. And then the width at these corners right here is about 34 inches, but I don't really know when you would take advantage of those corners. Again, similar thing here is that the lid actually goes right here, and same back here. So where it slopes up here, your clearance between that and the lid is about 4 inches of depth, and then over here from that to the lid is about 6 inches. Just for fun, the diagonal of that second understorage compartment is about 38.5 inches. So now let's close up those compartments and fold these seats down. So now what I'll do is give you two different possibilities here so you can judge the range. So I'll put the front seats all the way forward first and show you how much distance there is from the trunk all the way to the back of those seats. So if you were camping in here, you could use that. And then I'll push those seats all the way back so you can see the different ranges that you're going to have, depending if you're camping or if you're seeing how much stuff you could fit in there. So somewhere in between there is going to be where your actual seat is going to be adjusted to. Mine's about right in between the furthest forward and the furthest back for the front seats, but you can gauge your number between those. So right now the driver's side seat is all the way forward and the passenger seat is all the way back. So right now if we measure from the driver's seat all the way back to where the trunk is going to be shutting this off, it's about 83 inches. Now if we do the same measurement from the passenger side, which is pushed all the way back to where the trunk is going to cut this off, it's about 73 inches. Now let's measure the distance from the rear seats out to where the trunk is going to cut this off. So it's right about here because there's the hinge and these pads go into here, and the trunk actually kind of takes up most of this bar. So in the center here, it's right about 43.5 to 44 inches. And then on the sides, it's going to be a little less right here, maybe about 42 inches. Now if we measure from the back of this seat up high to where that location would be on the back of the trunk, because it does slope up, it's about 32 inches. This one's going to be kind of hard to see, but basically I'm going to measure from the trunk down to the bottom of the understorage compartment. So from the glass to that compartment, if you had something tall that you were trying to fit in the trunk, and this is with the trunk closed obviously. So back at the very rear of that understorage compartment, it's about 40.5 inches tall. Now if we measure from the furthest part forward of the understorage compartment up to the glass, it's about 44 inches until you hit the glass. So measuring down the hood, getting as exact as I can, it's about 40 13/16, and that's inches. Now with the frunk opened, if we look across at the overall storage space at the top here, going from the inside to the other side, it's about 17 inches. I guess if I actually put it inside, at the base, it's about 14 inches. So at the base, 14 inches. Now coming up towards the top, right around 17 inches. Now the biggest width of the frunk is right about 35 inches, and then it slopes in because it's a little bit rounded. And the smallest width is right at the ends, right at about 28 inches. Now the largest depth of the frunk is right here, and then it slopes down, as you obviously can see. And that's when you get up to the trim to where it would be able to close, about 16 inches. And then at the smallest part where it'd be able to close, right about 12 inches. Maybe a tiny bit more for each of those because it does have a little bit of leeway up here. Then going diagonal on the frunk, it's about 34.5 inches. Then, as I've pointed out before, there's this actual seal up here. So if I measure across just the middle of that seal, it's about 37.5 inches. If I go to what I believe is about the biggest, we're looking at about 39.5 inches. And then this seal, it kind of slopes here, so it's hard to truly tell. But if we go from this point up to here, 21 inches, and then right here, the actual seal itself around the edges is right at about 5 inches, but it does get longer over here as it slopes almost to about 8 inches. Then while we're here, might as well, the actual latch is about 3 inches, and then 1.75 inches at the biggest part, down to 1.5 inches here. Now the way that these brackets are for the Model Y is actually slightly different than the Model 3. So I'll just measure the length of that right at about 8.5 inches. Now let's just measure each of these different levels right here. So there's this lip with this vent, and then up to here, and then up to the top of the car. So right in the middle, right here is about 11.5 inches. Then over to here, this lip where it actually starts, again, everything's rounded, is 16.5, and then up here is 28.5. But as you can see when we actually bring the camera down, everything's rounded, so this all of this space rounding up to where I measured. It's just kind of hard because it keeps going down further and further. Now this tow hook cover, which I apologize needs to be cleaned, that happened this morning, is 2 3/8 inches across. Alright, so let's measure everything about the wheels. The actual center part of the wheel right here is about 6 inches, but to be honest, it's like 6 2/16, so 6 1/8 of an inch. Then if I measure from the ground to the top of the tire and look across it, we're looking at about 27 3/4 of an inch. And then the actual wheel itself, from what I can see out here, is 21 1/2 inches. And then from the ground up to here, right about 30 1/2 inches, but it's honestly about 30 7/16 of an inch. Now if I look for what I think is about the widest part here, when I look from this side, it's about 34 inches across there. And then this actual plastic piece right here is about 1 1/2 inches, but really it's about 1 10/16, so 1 5/8. Now let's move on to everything we can get on this front door. So first, I guess I'll measure this front camera right here. It's right about 6 inches in length. I assume that is the exact same camera that we see on the Model 3. So now that the mirrors are folded out, if we measure from the edge of the car out to about where the mirrors are sticking out, it's about 10 1/2 inches. Then the mirrors themselves are actually a little taller than the Model 3, but not quite as wide. This trim right here, which maybe some people would want to get chrome added, 39 inches long. And then these door handles right here are about 8 1/2 inches. Then at their largest point right here, we're looking at 1 1/4 of an inch. And at the smallest point, we're looking at about 3/4 of an inch. So now let's do this whole mirror right here. The actual glass inside at its biggest is right at about 6 inches, and up to kind of where the smallest is, we're looking at about 5 1/2 inches or so. And then the height at its biggest, kind of hard to see, but probably about 5 1/2 inches by 4 inches right here at its lowest. And then actually the whole structure of the mirror right here at its smallest, 6 1/2 inches, and the biggest down here is going to be about 7 1/2 inches. And then height for the whole thing itself, 6 inches at its biggest, at its lowest, I guess you'd call that 3 1/2, but you can judge for yourself. So this right here is the ground clearance on the driver's side in the front. So it's right about 7 inches when you really line it up there. And that's pretty good. It does slope a little further back towards the back, and Tesla officially lists 6.6 inches as the ground clearance for these wheels. Now let's measure the front driver's side window, which should be the same on both sides. But if I go down to the bottom, over to here, it's about 35, a little over 35. So we're looking at 35 1/4 actually on the bottom there. There to the middle, about 35 1/2, depending. Diagonal of the window is about 44 1/4 right there. So this side pillar right here, we're looking at about 17 3/4, maybe a tiny bit more than that. And then over here, it's about a 1/2 inch less, right around 17 1/8 or 2/8. And then width of this side pillar right here, 5 1/2. And then up at the top, right at about 3 1/2. Height of the front window, right around 17 3/4 of an inch. Then if I go down over here to the lowest possible point, 7 3/4 of an inch. And of course, that's just the visible part of the window. There's more underneath, and then a tiny bit more that's already rolled up into the seal that rolls down when you open the door. Now the rear handle is exactly the same. If I do this rear trim right here, from here back to where the door disconnects, we're looking at about 38 1/2 inches, depending on where you measure. And then the bottom of the window, back to where it disconnects, is about 31 1/2 inches. And then up at the top, about 30 1/4 of an inch. Now if I measure from the ground to where the handle actually starts, it's about 37 inches. And then the ground up to where the actual window starts is about 44 inches. Now I've already measured this ground clearance at about 7 inches, but if we look to where this actually is, the entrance, you can see right there, it's right about 17 inches or so. So now let's go from the ground to where this seat is, and this is where I have it adjusted to right now, and I'll do the lowest and the highest adjustments in a second. But if you look across there, right about 29 inches probably. So now this seat is at the lowest point, and if we're looking at the front of the seat right there, this is the absolute lowest it's going to be from the ground up to where that seat is in the Model Y, and that's about 28.5 inches. And of course, it's important to keep in mind that's where the lip of this is, so when we come to the back, it's about 27 inches, as the seat obviously slopes a little bit. Then if we measure from the floor of the car up to the lip right there, depending on how you judge this, I would say it's about 12 inches. It's a little bit more, as you can see, to the top of the lip, but obviously this squishes down as soon as you get in the car. And then over here, about 11 inches or so. Then if we go from the front right here, where your legs are actually going to be, I would say probably about 11.5 inches right there. All right, so now the seat is all the way as high as it can go. So from the ground up to the seat, this is the absolute highest you can get in the Model Y. This is about 30 to 30.5 inches, depending. And of course, keep in mind the seat is going to squish as soon as you get in. And then down over here, we're looking probably about 29 inches or so. Then from the actual base of where your feet are going to be inside the car, right about 13 to 13.5 inches. Now let's measure the actual size of this door opening. So if I do it right here in the middle, 37.5 inches or so, maybe a little bit less. But of course, all of this is different because it's always sloping and rounding everywhere. So diagonal across the door, right at about 57.5 inches. Now from the bottom over here to the top at the largest point, it's about 44 inches. Right there over to here, again about 44 inches. Now let's see, about the smallest part of the door is right about 28 inches. About 31.5 inches down there, depending. So now I'm going to measure for people who are really tall and are wondering about headroom. Keep in mind this seat does squish down a little bit, of course, but if I measure just from the seat up to the glass roof, I'll give you that. So from the low point of the seat up to the glass roof, you're looking at about 40 inches. So when I do the base of the car up to the roof, it's about 47 inches. So it's hard to show you on camera, but I did the floor of the car up to the roof, and it's about 46 to 47 inches, give or take. Now I'll go ahead and put this seat all the way back and show you how much room there is to here, because that's probably where your knees would be hitting if you're worried about that. So here is the back seat, back as far as it can go. And right here you're looking at about 18.5 to 19 inches. So from the back of the seat up to there, you're looking at about 36 inches. Now I'll measure the dash in a second, but I believe it is exactly the same as the Model 3, and the steering wheel is definitely the same, screen is definitely the same. Let you know about the console in a second as well. Now here is the driver's side floor mat that comes with the car. I apologize, it needs to be cleaned, but I'll just give you every measurement I can on this guy. So right there is about 21.75 of an inch. It just slopes in a little bit up to about 21 inches there. Now there is down to 20 inches. So this split, this is for the dead pedal right here. And it's about 4 inches. It's a tiny bit less than that. And then right here is 4.5 inches. 12.5 inches to 13 inches. And then length, including the dead pedal, you're looking at about 30.5 inches. And then length on the side without the dead pedal is 24 5/8 of an inch. Now, if you're actually trying to make floor mats, I apologize for those dimensions. Let me know in an email if you want me to measure it properly and I can actually do it correctly. I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to help people out in general. So right here, similar to what we did in the front, this measurement up to here from the ground is about 17.25 inches. And then up to the actual seat itself is about 27 inches. And these seats can't obviously lower or raise. And then if we look from the floor of the car up to these seats, depending on how you think of it, it's about 14 inches, 13 to 14 inches. And then I have this seat in my normal driving position, but I'll show you the extremes. And right now, from the actual seat itself, where your knees would be touching, to the seat end is about 15 inches, maybe 14.5. From the back of the back seat up to where your knees would touch in my normal driving position, it's about 31.5 inches. Now with the front seat pushed all the way back, this distance right here is about 9 inches. And then this distance right here is about 26.5 inches. But keep in mind, with this front seat being all the way back, I don't really know many people that actually need to drive with their seat this far back. It's very far back. And now this is the front seat pushed all the way forward, and similar situation here. I don't know many people that would drive with this seat all the way forward, but I'm giving you the extreme so you can see what the legroom could be like. So this distance from the front seat back to where the back seats start is about 19 inches. And then from seat back all the way to the rear of the rear seats is about 36.5 inches, 36.5 to 37 inches. Now while we're at it, might as well get the overall width of these seats. I see it at about 51 inches across. Now for the rear doors, if we look across up here, about 28 inches, just a tiny bit less. 28.5 inches from that corner up to here, 49 inches. So here is the rear ground clearance, and this is the lowest that I can find it. So I think this would be the overall ground clearance of the car, and it's just under 6 inches. So even though Tesla lists 6.6 inches, this is actually under 6 right here. So now let's measure from the base of the seats up to the glass roof, and then I'll do from the floor back here up to the glass roof. It'll be kind of hard because the roof is sloping that whole time, so you gotta give or take a few inches if you're calculating floor to here, because your head's not going to be here, your head's going to be back here, but let's give it a go. So from the base and the back of this seat, it's about 39 inches until you hit the glass roof. And then from the base of the floor up to the glass roof, again, take this with a grain of salt, and this also includes the floor mat, that is about 51 inches. So this center console right here, this actual inner part, this piece, 6 3/8. And then the height of that whole piece, including the USB-C ports, 2 3/4 of an inch. Then if I measure it kind of eyeballing the overall width, because again, as with everything in this car, it's sloped, it's not a perfect square. It's about 7 1/4 inch. Now the height from the ground up to where this starts, again, is hard to determine because it slopes. But if I do it up to this line, it's about 16.5 inches. So these seats are the exact same as the Model 3, but they're on these risers. And then this track is going to be the same as the Model 3. So if we measure these risers, it's right about 6 inches tall. So these are sitting exactly 6 inches taller from the ground than they do in the Model 3. So these are the same wheels as the front. I compared the actual tires based on the parts, and they're the same on the front and the back, which is different in the performance model. But similar thing here, up to the wheel well from the ground is 31 inches. And then across, where I think it's about the biggest, 34 inches. Now this back window, I don't really know how you're supposed to entirely do this, but 14 inches right there. And then right here, it's about 16.5 inches. And then height for this window right here, about 10.5 inches, just a tiny bit less than that for the trim. Now I believe this charge port is exactly the same as the Model 3. I'll try to measure it without it opening on me. 8.5 inches right there, but it does get a little bigger there, around to 9. And then height-wise, I mean, about 5 1/4. So here at the trunk, from down at the ground up to this lip, it's about 11.5 inches. And then up to where the actual hatchback door shuts on it, it's about 24 3/4 of an inch. And then if we look straight across from where this is flat down to the ground, it's about 26 1/4 inches. And this is one of the things I love most about this car, is that it's flat right here, all the way in. There's no lip. Now these are all measurements I'm pretty sure are going to be exactly the same as Model 3, but let's do them. So measuring across the dash on that piece of wood, it's about 54 1/4 inches across. Now for the center console, which most people want to wrap, and I definitely do because you touch it once and fingerprints. So for this piece right here, when you look at length, it's about 7 inches this way. Now going this way, about 7.5, and it is going to slope a little to more like 7 3/4, just a tiny bit less than that. Then the cup holders, going inside them, at the bottom of them, it's a little less than 7 inches across. Probably about 6 3/4 of an inch all the way across on the bottom. Then they slope up, per usual, to about 7 1/4 inches at the top. Now this whole piece, including the cup holders right here, down to about right here is 9 inches. And it does slope down a little bit, so if you include that, it's 9 1/4 inches. Then across for this piece is 7 9/16. See it up here. It's about 7 10/16, so 7 5/8. Now this top piece right here actually comes up And so there's this tiny little bar up here that I can't actually get to access the full measurement of. So right here, I'll do this piece where it actually comes apart. I would call this 7 7/16 of an inch. And then the width right here, 7 7/8 of an inch. But it does get bigger at the top, just like everything, to 9 inches. Now, if you go inside, it does slope, so it's higher here than it is down here. But the highest depth is going to be about 6.5 inches. And then across here, which is where it's the biggest, you're looking at about 6.5 inches. Smallest across here, where it's at its smallest, 6 inches. And then the overall length of that opening is 7 3/4. It also came with this little organizer that actually fits right in here. So I'll measure that right now. So measuring edge to edge right here, and this is how it fits like this, it's 6 5/8. Then edge to edge here is going to be different. So right here is about 7 inches, down to where it slopes at about 6 9/16 of an inch. But if we measure the inside there, it's going to be different. So this is about 6 3/4 of an inch. And then here, at the biggest point, about 6 1/16 of an inch. Over here, at the smallest point, 5 3/4 of an inch. And then depth of this, including that lip, is just over 2.5 inches. You could call that 2 9/16. And then up here, it's actually the same. And then this armrest, where it comes out to this crease right here, you have 13 inches. So there you have it. There's all the measurements of the Model Y that I could think of, and then some. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you're someone that stuck around, this definitely probably meant something for you, because the average person, I assume, wouldn't be too interested in this video. Overall, this car is a lot more spacious and cargo friendly than the Model 3, but I'm still questioning that third row of seats. I sat back there when I did that shot, and I really don't see how it's going to work. If you made it to the end of this video, kudos to you, and thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to this channel if you're not already for more Model Y videos. Not always this technical, don't worry. And then also make sure to like this video if you appreciated it so that more people can find it. I really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.